So I was here a few months ago. We talked about some of the things you have to do to get on the path towards a municipal fiber network, if that's in your future. And the first part is becoming a municipal light plant under Massachusetts regulation. And that takes, I believe, a couple of town-wide votes to get a town meeting to start that pathway. What I brought this time, just to give you a little more detail, get a little more granular, I modeled what I thought Southampton would cost if we were building it today with a municipal fiber network. Some of the data I didn't have was how many road miles do you have of roads. That's to mimic what you have to build for a fiber network.
Any idea, Ed, how many road miles we have? Randall's not here, so.
Well, I guessed 70 miles, so I don't know if I'm close or not close, but
80 something, I think.
oh, okay. The cost just went up.
The cost of these always goes up.
And Ed knows, because Ed, when he was in Beckman, started this process there. But basically, you know, as I talked about, you're entering an arena now where your municipal network essentially competes for the hearts and minds of residents with commercial networks like Spectrum Charter here, Verizon Wireless, next generation Verizon Wireless. So we've done that in Westfield. We have a bit of a leg up because we are the municipal electric provider. We are familiar with poles. We have bucket trucks. We have guys that can multitask and do both kinds of services. But we have been very successful in competing in that competitive environment and winning internet business from the residents of Westfield. Really, you're competing when you build a fiber network with a superior network to the existing networks that are out there. So you can really compete if it's an internet-centric household, if it's a household that knows how to stream television, if it's a younger generation household that's growing up on streaming television. So it is a viable project. This basically models what it might look like. Again, the top portion, I estimated that you had 70 road miles. We could adjust that. And also, we have to put in a figure for how much of that is underground. When you go underground in development, the costs ramp up pretty quickly. Not quite double the cost per foot, but pretty significant. And then, how many telephone poles are there in town? This average that I put in here is 30 poles per mile. Because when you make the space on those telephone poles for your municipal network, you get the privilege of paying the utilities to move their utilities up or down or replacing the telephone pole. So we've seen a cost anywhere from $400 per pole in the town to over $1,100 per pole in a town if the pole infrastructure is very old in a town. I wouldn't imagine it's that old here. We're talking about some of the hill towns that hadn't been touched in decades. Then we look at what I have called here PDUs. Those are premise dwelling units where people live, where businesses are. That's really your income, your future income base. Then you project a percentage of those that you think you would capture over time that would be your customers. The next portions are really the construction of the network itself. You have a design and engineering phase where literally somebody walks out every telephone pole in the town, maps it out, gets the footages, collects the data on the telephone pole, takes a photograph of it, and you use photogrammetry to determine what the make-ready process would look like as you move other utility networks up and down the pole and see if there's enough room. So all that is conducted, then you hand it over to the utilities, and they then may have to look at it again, or maybe they have to spend time determining what they have to do. Move the electric up or down, move the telephone network up and down, move the cable network up or down. So that's a process that takes a lot of time, you know, probably minimum of 12 months, probably more towards 24 months to get implemented. And then they license you, the MLP, the telephone poles. Then you get to spend your money building the network. Building the network is that construction portion that's on this sheet. And you're looking at really probably over $3 million to build the cable network, to do the drops to the house, and to implement service to customers. That's a quick summary of really the process.
Now, in something like this, can you estimate a payback based on the take rate up here? I'm assuming that's the people that will actually take the
And
service.
it really is going to depend how you operate it. You know, if you hire employees and stuff, it's different than if you have, and your proximity to Westfield lends itself that we could certainly be a resource for you in a couple different ways. So what we do is towns we're working with, and outside of Westfield, we're working with 20 hill towns right now, constructing their networks. And we'll probably be the operator and internet service provider in most of those networks. And our rate started at over $35 a month, and as we accumulate communities, we have more efficiency, so we pass that along. So by the time we're done with the hill towns, our rate would be probably under $30 per month per customer for our services, which are, we basically answer the phone, take orders, we answer the phone, take problems, we send service techs out to fix problems, and we do all the work, all the forms, all the government regulations required for submission. And then the only thing that's kind of the ad hoc piece is if a telephone pole gets broken and we have to come repair the network, that's an add-on cost. But basically, we can pretty much do the operate the network, soup to nuts for a community if they go in that direction.
So $30 per month per customer is for the full service, basically.
Right. And for instance, in Westfield, we retail that at $69.95 for retail. So there's a margin there that you have to work with. You got to pay back the debt, things like that. There's some incremental costs, the utility cost for your telecommunications hut, items like that. Some towns in the hill towns have gone as high as $110 per customer on a retail side. Depends what their economics look like. We have some towns, some of the hill towns have only 6 homes per mile. So Southampton, it's probably going to come out to be over 20 homes per mile on average. Some of the hill towns, under 6 homes per mile. So they're building a lot of fiber cable plant, and getting very few customers per mile. So the economics,
So the
don't
cost
help
is
them.
a lot higher for them?
And plus, for every time you're on a telephone pole, you lease that space every year. It's about a $10 or $11 charge per pole per year you pay for.
But that's included in that $30?
No, it's not. That's extra above, the addition to the $30.
So how
What would an average look like then, I guess, per household, using this $30 a month? What are the add-ons that you're talking about?
It probably depends. These networks are inherently reliable. They sustain. It's usually when a tree comes down, they're going to be repaired. But we've done only a handful of service calls in the towns where we've actually lit up across this winter. So the cost has been extremely low. If we get a huge weather event, then that's when you might have a lot of damage to repair, the costs ramp up. But what you do is you insure yourself against that. So if there's a weather incident and your out-of-pocket costs exceed $10,000, you can buy an insurance policy which covers you in that event. We also recommend that we have crews, but in a major weather event, we suggest to towns that they bundle together or independently get emergency contractors on board with the retainer. And we write contracts and deal with them. We direct them, but they're guaranteed to show up with crews and trucks that can fix problems in the event that our staff is stretched out in other areas. So we've kind of built in a lot of contingencies to make it operate.
And then just another question. I need to know, how are you, you're municipal, so how are you structured in terms of,
The other
you're
towns?
not private for-profit,
We're a municipal entity, so we
Okay.
do it for the shareholders of Westfield, is what we work for. So in Westfield, we have one model. In the other towns where we work for, we set our structure to work for them as a subcontractor. So we have an intergovernmental agreement with the towns that sets us up as network operator and internet service provider. Prior to that, for the construction portion, we're the owner's project manager. So we basically have a suite of contractors that do different things, do the design, do the mapping, do the construction, do the drops of the house, and we usually have them work under our umbrella contracts. And we'll go out for new contracts and always have resources to do that. We also do procurement for all the contracts when it comes specifically to bidding out your construction, bidding out different components. What we do is we have website, we stand up and we go out and, under mass law, do the bidding process.
So you're giving us a figure here of 4.4 million total to get this off the ground?
Yeah, now this is not totally accurate. This is in today's costs that we're seeing. But if the road miles goes from 70 to 86 miles, that's going to increase.
Okay.
I guesstimated that you have about 2,000 homes, or PDUs. So I based some of the numbers off that. But this is basically the first run at the numbers, just to give you kind of a scope of what it might cost.
And I know we're kind of late coming into this, obviously.
Well,
no?
Not really. I mean, a lot of towns are in your exact location, process-wise. They're saying, do we want to do this? Do we want to compete? You know, what's the right thing to do? So there's a lot of folks that are in the same area of decision-making that you are.
And I guess then my other question, is there any, I know that initially there was a lot of state and federal money available. Is that still available to help towns build these infrastructure?
Most of the state and federal money is really targeted towards folks that have very poor broadband, like the hill towns, where there's no cable operator. There's limited, if any, DSL in some of these towns, and there's literally no cell service. So you go to some of these towns, that's where the money's targeted. And all the federal money is targeted there, and the state is helping these small towns do this. I think as those issues get solved across the 40 towns that remain in Massachusetts, then you might see future money be released for developing towns that currently have a solution in place.
Okay.
With the estimated 2,000 households in town, which may or may not be right on, what would be the sort of the minimum number that you would want to see buy into the program and be on hookup to make it worthwhile for you to come and even do it?
Traditionally, you have to have 30% market share to make a rebuild overbuild worthwhile. Now, you're a little more rural than a city like Westfield, so that number might increase where you'd want to try to strive for 33, 34, 35%.
Now, you all set there?
No, go ahead.
You're talking about internet. Can we do a vote for the telephone on the same fiber
Yeah.
optics?
So what we do is when we sell internet, we also, everything, when you take a municipal fiber service, everything becomes an app on that network.
Right.
Telephone's an app on that network. TV becomes an app on that network. You build your own TV service. We don't offer a traditional cable package where you put a box on your set and
Right.
give you a package of 200 channels. What happens is you as a customer build your own TV platform. Maybe you get Netflix, maybe you get Hulu Live. You pick and choose from. There's literally 50 different services you can build your own TV from. So a lot of the customers in Westfield will pick like a Netflix and a Hulu Live, and their TV investment might be $55, $60 a month. But you can still buy HBO, you can still buy all those things. You just can pick and choose yourself from a multitude of providers.
So do we have any more questions?
I was just wondering if you could I'm just having a couple of questions. Could you just summarize, like, what is the advantage to the residents of Southampton to have this as opposed to what they currently have? And also, what's the advantage to us? And how many of the Hilltown towns in Westfield are actually running this fiber above ground? It just seems like, why are we still putting things in the air? Like, we have storms, we have all kinds of problems that it's getting worse before it gets better.
Because it's in the air now because the utility space is in the air. The cost to put it on the poles is about half the cost it is to put underground. So this $4 million could easily turn into $8 million if we put it underground. Everybody does a cost-benefit analysis and determines that if you have aerial poles available, it's just a long-term better solution. Even though you pay a rental on the poles and such, there's still what they call backhoe fade when it comes somebody digs up the cable, then it's just more expensive to repair. So, underground utilities are just more expensive. It can be done. There's different technologies that are trying to make it more inexpensive, micro boring, things like that, but it hasn't been proven to be the solution at this point.
So if we had new neighborhoods that were all underground, can't you just use the same conduit and put it underground?
There may not be a conduit, because then nobody planned to put an extra conduit in. For a long time now in Westfield, we're the electric company, so we always put extra conduit in. If we go to a building, we dig a line, we dig a street up, we put extra conduits in. And they've been doing that for years in preparation for building a fiber network. But a lot of the existing developments won't have that. You can actually, you would plow it in on the tree belt, cut driveways, put it in, things like that. But yeah, it's still more costly than having aerial location of the
So
pole.
if there's not access there, then it's twice as expensive.
Yeah, and even when it comes to a house drop, like where I live, I have utility poles, but my drop, it goes underground to my house because I put conduit in.
Right.
We can actually plow in a microduct, which is just like a tractor with a blade that plows it into the side of someone's house and leaves you a tube from the pole to the house, which minimizes the cost, but it's still more expensive.
So could you just tell us what's the advantage to the residents in town and to us as a municipality?
Is it cost, quality, both?
Yeah, it's cost, quality, plus revenue, because the residents will be paying you the money essentially to have the service. The quality of the network is far superior than the existing cable technology. I was in the cable business for 28 years, launched cable modems here in Southampton as part when I was at Greater Media and then Charter 20 years ago. It's about 10 times the speed of the current average cable connection, both up and down from the internet. So basically, it really enhances the work from home. It enhances any business that comes to the town would have the capability to get a much more affordable telecommunication services at a higher quality of speed.
So what is the speed, just?
Well, the networks we build, we offer 1 gig service today, 1,000 megabyte service both up and down. But they're capable of upgrading to 10 gigs both up and down without any changing of the equipment.
Definitely faster than mine.
Right.
You may have already gone over this, but is there a payback period or is there a return on investment? Like at what point do you break even on this?
It depends really on how you're structured cost-wise. For instance, most people plan on trying to make up their operational deficiencies in 5 years, then go cash flow positive and start to contribute to pay down their debt. Most municipalities they're going to pay down their debt in 20 years, over 20 years. So it's not, you're in a hole out the gate until you get customers on. Then once your customers build up enough.
So once you ramp up.
Yeah, but you got to really do that individually based on your business plan. That's why it's a little bit easier in the case where if you use somebody like a Westfield Gas and Electric, you knew your fixed cost was $30, you knew your pole rental costs, you knew all that. You could put that in a business plan and see where you can start to become cash flow positive.
So if we said go today, how long does it take in general to have it up and going?
It's, well, you'd have to become an MLP.
Right.
After that, then it's probably let's call it 18-month process. 2 years between design engineering, walking out the town, and getting the poles ready to put your network on. So it's about a 3-year project.
Okay.
Would customers still have the option of doing something like Charter? I mean, of course they'll have the option of doing direct TV.
Yeah.
So would we be competing, or would it be a monopoly like it is right now?
You would be.
Charter's the only game in town.
Well, I don't know if they are, because you got a Verizon network, you got wireless service.
Well,
you'd be competing in that arena with them, but people will still have the Charter would still be an option for people. They already have the network on the poles that's not going away. So what they have is probably a fully loaded TV product at a high cost, but your internet service you'd be building in would be superior to that. So depends on household by household, people are going to make decisions on taking your service versus the Charter service.
Are you confident that this is actually going to be it's not going to become obsolete? I mean, you just mentioned about wireless. I mean, are we really going to be using fibers for 20, 30, 50 years?
I'm concerned about that too.
Yeah, that's a genuine concern. We don't know what 5G is going to bring with future wireless technology. We don't know if it'll come to a place like Southampton. We know it'll come to Boston and the suburbs around Boston, but will it come to Westfield? Will it come to Southampton? We don't know. We see that the Hilltowns don't even have cellular service, let alone 5G. on the back of 5G, the way that technology works is you have a lot of small cells doing a small area. Will their business plan with a small number of houses in that cell range support the infrastructure? So that's the whole business decision Verizon makes. But those 5G antennas are supported by a fiber. So in our business plan, we look at leasing fiber to those 5G cells as one of the places we can bring revenue in the future from a fiber network.
This may be a too picky a question, I'm not sure, but suppose you put in your system down East Street, for example, and right now there's 40 houses that would be interested, and yet there's another 60 houses that maybe just want to stay where they are, they don't know yet, they haven't decided. To what extent do you put in the whole system so that when and if somebody then decides to join on, it's ready?
Good question. When you're building it, you build it for everybody, because you don't know where those 40 houses are.
Gotcha.
And actually, when we build systems, we have to have a fiber that's designed for every house.
Okay.
And then we build in, also we talk to the town and say, where are your growth areas? Because we're going to put extra fibers in to serve these potential growth areas. And then we're going to add 15 or 20% on top of that, because the fiber is very inexpensive. It's all in the labor to put it up. So you don't want to put up fiber later. You want to build in that inexpensive resource